Hi, class. Well, welcome back. Right now, we're going to finish book 12, which is going to finish kind of our reading for the first half of the Odyssey. So, congratulations, we're getting halfway through the Odyssey at the end of the reading today. We start here on line 192. We are halfway, basically right in the middle of Odysseus's encounter with the Sirens. So, if you remember from the last readings, Odysseus is encountering the Sirens. The Sirens lead ships into the rocks in front of them with their beautiful singing. And he tells the men to put beeswax in their ears and to keep rowing past the land of the Sirens. But he has tied himself to the mast so that he can hear the Sirens and live to have the encounter. And he's told his men, no matter what he says, to keep on rowing. So we'll pick it up right here. We literally pick it up with the Sirens singing to him. So they sang in sweet utterance, and the heart within me desired to listen. And I signaled my companions to set me free, nodding with my brows. But they leaned on and rowed hard, and Paramedes and Eurylochus, rising up straightway, fastened with me even more lashings and squeezed me tighter. But when they had rowed on past the Sirens, and we could no longer hear their voices, and lost the sound of their singing, presently my eager companions took away from their ears the beeswax which I had stopped them, and they set me free from my lashings. So, here in the notes, you could say something along the lines of Odysseus survives hearing the Sirens, which really is probably very possible that he is the only human living in Greek mythology that did that. I don't know any other stories of anybody who did that, but it would absolutely be rare to hear the beautiful song of the Sirens and live. But after we had left the island behind, the next thing we saw was smoke and heavy surf, and we heard it thundering. This is going to be Charybdis. The men were terrified, and they let the oars fall out of their hands, and these banged all about the wash. The ship stopped still, with the men no longer rowing to keep away on her. Then I, going up and down the ship, urged my companions, standing beside each man and speaking to him in kind words. Dear friends, surely we are not unlearned in evils. This is no greater evil now than it was when the Cyclops had cooped us in his hollow cave by force and violence. Forgot to circle the Cyclops there. But even there, by courage and by counsel and my my intelligence. We escaped away. I think that this will be remembered someday too. Then do as I say. Let us be won over. Sit well, all of you, to your oarlocks, and dash your oars deep into the breaking surf of the water, so that in a way Zeus, man, I'm missing all sorts of names over here, in a way Zeus might grant that we get clear of this danger and flee away from it. For you, steersmen, I have this order, to store it deeply in your mind as you control the steering oar of this hollow ship. You must keep her clear from where the smoke and the breakers are, and make hard for the sea rock, lest, without your knowing, she might drift that way and you bring us all into disaster. So, we already talked about this, but the ship will steer away from Charybdis. Now, the problem, of course, is that Scylla is on the other side. But as Odysseus was counseled last chapter, you only lose 6 men to Scylla, but you would lose all men to Charybdis. So it's better to give up the 6 than lose everyone. So I spoke, and they quickly obeyed my words. I had not spoken yet of Scylla, right? If 6 men, if you're going to get killed by Scylla, maybe you don't tell them because, they might freak out. A plague that could not be dealt with for fear my companions might be terrified and give over their rowing and take cover inside the ship, right? So he wants them to row hard, so he's not going to tell them about the danger of Scylla. For my part, I let go from the mind the difficult instruction that Circe had given me, for she told me not to be armed for combat. But I put on my glorious armor, and taking up 2 long spears in my hand, I stood bestriding the vessel's foredeck. So he's ignoring Circe here. She told him it's not going to be any use trying to be armed for combat, but he's going to do it anyways. For I expected Scylla the rocks to appear first from that direction. She who brought pain to my companions. I could not make her out anywhere, and my eyes grew weary from looking everywhere on the misty face of the sea rock. So Odysseus knows that Scylla's coming, but he doesn't know where she is. Imagine the fog and the crashing waves and Charybdis. This is intense scene. So here I have a picture of Scylla and Charybdis. You can see here, it's not super accurate because Odysseus's men don't actually fall down into the water, and which we'll read in a second. But you can kind of see here, this is the general idea. You have Charybdis, which is a whirlpool, but in some texts, this guy is characterized as a big mouth, an animal, right? And this is why a little later on in the chapter we'll see Odysseus say that it sucks stuff up and then it vomits stuff back out. And Odysseus is going to rely on that. Scylla is a scary beast with many different heads, and we're going to read about that right now. Okay. So we sailed up the narrow strait, lamenting, sorrowful. We are mourning. Okay. On one side was Scylla, and on the other side was shining Charybdis, who made her terrible ebb and flow of the sea's water. When she vomited, right, that's what I talked about, she vomited it up like a cauldron all over strong fire. The whole sea would boil up. The whole sea would boil up in turbulence, and foam flying spattered the pinnacles of the rocks in either directions. So she sucks it down and she spits it back up. That's important to remember as we read forward. But then in turn, she sucked down the sea's salt water, and the turbulence showed all the inner sea, and the rock around it groaned terribly, and the ground showed at the sea's bottom, black with sand, and green fear seized upon my companions. We, in fear of the destruction, kept our eyes on Charybdis, but meanwhile Scylla out of the hollow vessel snatched 6 of my companions, the best of them for strength in the hand's work. So Scylla comes in as they're frightened as Charybdis, and she snatches them. And when I turned to look at my ship with my other companions, I saw their feet and their hands from below already lifted high above me, and they cried out to me and called me by name, and the last time they ever did it in my heart's sorrow. And here's another simile. As a fisherman with a very long rod and a jutting rock will cast his treacherous bait out for little fishes, and then sinks the horn of the field-edging ox into the water, then hauls them up and throws them on dry land, gasping and struggling. So they gasped and struggled as they were hoisted up the cliff. Right on her doorway, she ate them up. They were screaming and reaching out with their hands in this horrid encounter. So you can imagine the men were dragged up on the cliff, and right there, if Scylla comes out, right? Okay, just imagine this is well drawn. Okay, the many heads of Scylla. Right here, the men were eaten, screaming, right? Screaming to Odysseus. They were eaten. Men were eaten on the doorstep. Scylla's doorstep. How terrible would that be? They're crying. They're reaching for you, saying, help us, help us. They're your friends, and there's nothing you can do to save them. All right, moving on. That was the most pitiful scene that the eyes have looked on in my sufferings as I explored the routes over the river. So Odysseus is saying, this is the saddest moment. Pitiful, right? You pity them. saddest isn't exactly the same as pitiful, but they're similar enough. There might be sadder moments, but if it's not the saddest, it's one of the saddest. That's what he means by that. Now, when we had fled away from the rocks and dreaded Charybdis and Scylla, we next made our way to the excellent island of the god, where ranged the handsome wide-browed oxen and many fat flocks of sheep belonging to the sun god Hyperion. While I was on the black ship, still out in the open water, I heard the lowing of the cattle as they were driven home, and the bleating of the sheep, and in my mind was struck by the saying of the blind prophet Tiresias, the Theban, and also by Circe. They were the ones that had given him instruction on this. Both had told me many times over to avoid the island of Helios, who brings joy to mortals. Then, sorrowful as I was, I spoke and told my companions, "Listen to what I say, my companions, though you are suffering evils, while I tell you the prophecies of Tiresias and Aea and Circe." Again, I'm having trouble underlining names. Here we go. Both have told me many times over to avoid the island of Helios, who brings much joy to mortals. How does Helios bring joy to mortals, right? He does it through sunlight. Sunlight brings me a great deal of joy. Okay? I'm imagining for you too. For there they spoke of the most dreaded disaster that waited for us, and so we drove the ship onwards, and so drive the ship, black ship onward and past the island. So Odysseus is saying this: skip this island. Okay? Don't even touch there. Now, note here that Eurylochus is always the one who seems to go against Odysseus. And so, once again, he's going to go against him. So I spoke, and the inward heart in them was broken. At once Eurylochus answered me with a bitter saying, "You are a hard man, Odysseus. Your force is greater, and your limbs never wear out." Anyways, you must be made of iron. When you will not let your companions, worn out with hard work and wanting to sleep, set foot on this island, where if we did, in the sea-girt island, we could once more make ready a greedy dinner. But you force us to blunder along, just as we are through the running night, driven from the island over the misty face of the water. In the nights, the hard storm-wise winds arise, and they bring damage to ships. How could any of us escape sheer destruction if suddenly there rises a blast of storm from the bitter blowing of the south wind or the west wind, who beyond others hammer our ship apart in despite of the gods, our masters? But now let us give way to the black night's persuasion. Let us make ready our evening meal, remaining close by our fast ship, and at dawn we will go aboard and put forth into the sea. So Eurylochus has a suggestion. He says, listen, you're a hard man. Let us at least, Eurylochus says, let us at least get one night's rest on shore. Now, this is going to be a mistake, as you're going to see in just a sec. It's going to be a big mistake, but that's what Eurylochus wants to do. So spoke Eurylochus, and my other companions assented, and I saw then what evil the divinity, the gods, had in mind for us. So Odysseus realizes this is when things go south. And so I spoke aloud to them and addressed them, the Eurylochus, in living words. Eurylochus, I'm only one man. You forced me to it. But come then, all of you, and swear a strong oath to me, that if we come upon some herd of cattle or some great flock of sheep, no one of you in evil and reckless action will slaughter any ox or sheep. No, rather than this, eat at your pleasure of the food immortal Circe provided. So, eat ship food, not island. Island, sheep, or cattle. Sorry, it's a little messy. So I spoke And they all swore an oath to me that I asked them. So they agreed. But after they had sworn an oath to me and made an end of it, we beached the well-made ship inside the hollow harbor, close to sweet water. And my companions disembarked also from the ship and expertly made the evening meal ready. So they get up, they found a good spot. But when they had put away their desire for eating and drinking, they remembered and they cried for their beloved companions, whom Scylla had caught out of the hollow ship and eaten. And in their crying, a quite sweet sleep descended. But after the third part of the night had come, right before morning, and the star changes, Zeus, the cloud gatherer, let loose on us a gale that blustered in a supernatural storm, and huddled under the clouds, scuds, land alike, and great water. Night sprang from heaven, but when young Dawn showed again her rosy fingers, we berthed our ship, dragging her to a hollow sea cave where the nymphs had their beautiful dancing places and sessions. So, huge storm. They drag ship to cave. Why? Because this storm is insane, right? Up here it says the storm was a supernatural storm, okay? One sent by the gods. Then I had an assembly and spoke my opinion before them. Friends, since there's food and drink stored in the fast ship, let us then keep our hands off cattle for fear that something may befall us. These are the cattle and fat sheep of the dreaded god Helios, who sees all things and listens to all things. So I spoke, and the proud heart in them was persuaded. But the south wind blew for a whole month, nor did any other wind befall after that, but only the south and the east wind. They're trying to go the other direction. As long as they still had food, tea, and red wine, the men kept their hands off the cattle, striving as they were for sustenance, for food. Then when all the provisions, all the food that had been on the ship had given out, they turned to hunting, forced to it, and went ranging after fish and birds, anything they could get their hands on, with curved hooks, for their hunger was exhausting their stomachs. Then I went along the island. Okay, in order, and I'll get this thing. But I want you to know something. Did the gods have it in for Odysseus? Note here that they're doing the right thing. I mean, yes, they did land on the island, but they're eating their own food instead of eating the cows and the sheep. They Odysseus's men hunt for food, okay, instead of eating the cows and the sheep. But even then, for a whole month, this storm rages. They can't get off the island. They should have just kept sailing, but they can't get off the island. So it begs the question, did the gods have it in for Odysseus and his men? Whose fault is this? Is this Odysseus' men's fault? Or is this the gods' fault? Always the question in Greek readings. Anyway, so I went to pray for the gods if any of them might show us some course to sail on. But when crossing the isle, I left my companions from behind. I washed my hands where there was a place sheltered from the wind, and prayed to all the gods whose hold is Olympus. But what they did was shed sweet sleep on my eyelids, and Eurylochus put an evil counsel before his companions. So Odysseus is sleeping. He talks to men as Osleeps. Listen to what I say, companions. Though you are suffering evils, all deaths are detestable for wretched mortals. But hunger is the sorriest way to die and encounter fate. Come then, let us cut out the best of Helios's cattle and sacrifice them to the immortals who hold wide heaven. And if we ever come back to Ithaca, land of our fathers, presently we will build a rich temple to the sun god Helios Hyperion, and store it with dedications many and good. But if in anger over his high-horned candle he wishes to wreck our ship, and the rest of the gods stand by him, I would far rather gulp the waves and lose my life in them once for all than be pinched to death on this desolate island. This is an interesting phrase. So Eurylochus is basically making the argument that better to drown than starve. Do you guys agree with that? It's faster. drown than starve. Note also that as much as we like to pick on Eurylochus, he has a plan. He says, listen, we will promise offerings. Okay? So he's not completely out of touch here. But we're going to read in this next part the problem with the plan. So spoke Eurylochus, and the other companions assented. They agreed, and at once cutting from near at hand the best of the Helios' cattle, for the handsome, broad-faced, horn-carved oxen were pasturing there, not far from the dark, proud ship. Credit to these men for not killing these oxen and being there for so long when they're right there. Literally, the oxen are right there. Driving these, they stationed themselves around them and made their prayers to the gods, pulling tender leaves from the deep-leaved oak tree. For they had no white barley left on the strong-benched vessel. When they had made their prayer... Okay, so first of all, note here, I put down here that this is not a proper offering. And that starts really from here to here, okay? They're going to make their... We've read about Greek offerings many times, okay? But they don't have all the elements for the offering. So this is a problem. It's not a proper offering that they're making here, right? They had no white barley. And note some of the other things left on the strong bench vessel. And then they made their prayer and slaughtered the oxen and skinned them. And they cut away the meat from the thighs and wrapped them in fat. That's normal. That's standard, making a double fold and laid shreds of flesh upon them. And since they had no wine, so I have no wine for the offering, to pour in the burnt offerings, they made a libation of water. Libation is like an offering soup of sorts. And roasted all the entrails, that's standard, but when they had burned the thigh pieces and tasted vitals, they cut the remainder into pieces and spitted them. So no barley, no water. This is an offering. They're doing their best, but it's not quite right. At that time, the quiet sleep was lost from my eyelids, and I went back down to my fast ship in Sanssouci shore. But on my way, as I was close to the oar-swept vessel, the pleasant savor of cooking meat came drifting around me. And I cried out my grief aloud to the gods immortal. So Odysseus smells the meat. And he cries out loud, Father Odysseus, and you everlasting and blessed gods, with piteous sleep you lulled me. Once again, whose fault is it? Is it Odysseus and his men, or is it the gods' fault? And to my confusion, my companions staying here dared a deed that was monstrous. They made the big mistake. Then Lepida, she's the daughter of Helios, of the light rose, ran swift with the message to Hyperion, the sun god. She tells her dad that we had killed the cattle, and angered at the heart, he spoke forth among the immortals. So he goes up to Zeus and talks to him. Here's Hyperion talking. Father Zeus, you and the everlasting and blessed gods punished the companions of Odysseus, son of Laertes, for they outrageously killed my cattle, in whom I always delighted on my way up to the starry heaven, or when I turned back again from heaven towards earth. Okay, now note, here's a threat. Unless these are made to give me just recompense for my cattle, I will go down to Hades and give my light to dead men. So threat. What is Helios' threat? His threat, okay, Helios will take light and sun to underworld. In other words, no longer will the world have its sun. I will take it to the underworld, which would be that's a very big threat, right? Then in turn, Zeus, who gathers the clouds, answered him, Helios, shine on as you do among the mortals and mortal men all over the grain-giving earth. Okay, that's important. Grain giving, that's what the sun gives. For my part, I will strike these men's fast ship midway on the open wine blue sea with a shining bolt and dash it to pieces. All this I heard afterwards from fair-haired Calypso, and she told me herself that she had heard it from Hermes. So basically, this story comes to Hermes, and then Calypso, and then to Odysseus. Okay. You don't need to do this in yours. I think if I came back and looked at this, I'd have to figure out what that means. But that's basically what happened. Hermes told Calypso, who told Odysseus this story. But then I came back to the ship and the seashore, and they all stood about and blamed each other, but were not able to find a remedy. They were not able to find a remedy, for the oxen were already dead. The next thing was that the gods began to show portents. This is symbols, okay? Portents, signs. The skins crawled, and the meat that was struck on the spirits bellowed, both roast and raw, and the noise was like the lowing of cattle. So this is interesting. The skins crawl. How creepy would that be to see a skin of a cattle crawl around, and the meat bellows. Still, even with that, 6 days hereafter, my own eager companions feasted on the cattle of Helios the sun god. So I guess that didn't scare them from eating it, cutting the best ones out. But when Zeus, the son of Cronos, established the 7th day, then at last the wind ceased from the stormy blowing. Okay, now they can leave. And presently we went aboard and pulled forth to the wide sea, and set the mast upright and hoisted the white sails on it. But after we had left the island, there was no more land in sight, but only the sky and the sea. Then the Cronian Zeus drew up a blue-black cloud. Blue-black and sailed over a hollow ship. And open sea was darkened beneath it. And she ran along for a very long time, and the screaming west wind came upon us, stormily blowing. So, Zeus causes a storm after they get away from land. And the mast went over backwards, and all the running gear collapsed in the wash, and the stern of the ship and the mast pole crashed down onto the steersman's head and pounded to pieces all the bones of his head, so that he, like a diver, dropped from the high deck, and the proud life left his bones there. So the mast literally came down and hit the oarsman on the head and crushed the life out of him. Ouch! Zeus, with thunder and lightning together, crashed upon our vessel, and struck by the thunderbolt of Zeus, she spun in a circle, and it was all full of brimstone. Brimstone is fire. My men were thrown in the water, and bobbing like sea crows, they were washed away in the running waves all around the ship, and the god took away their homecoming. Their homecoming means they didn't get home, so they died. They never made it home. But I, Odysseus himself, escapes. Went on my way through the vessel to where the high seas had worked the keel. That's the part of the ship towards the back. Towards the back to the front. So if you have a ship, right? Nope, it's draw. If you have a ship like this, then there's a backbone of the boat that kind of comes, especially wooden boats. There's a backbone of the boat like this. That's the keel. Okay? So I lashed both keel and mast and then rowed the two of them. So the backbone of the boat, he lashed it to the mast, and he rowed the two of them, and the deadly storm winds carried me. After this, the west wind ceased from its stormy blowing, and the south wind came swiftly on, bringing my spirit grief that I must measure the whole way back to Charybdis. So he's trying to go north. The wind is carrying him south. So he is heading back to Charybdis. All night I was carried along. With the sun rising, I came to the sea rock of Scylla and the dreaded Charybdis. At this time, Charybdis sucked down the sea's salt water. So, Odysseus, he's in trouble. Charybdis is sucking down the water, right? We've got the whirlpool. Okay, but what does Odysseus do? But I reached high in the air above me to where a tall fig tree grew and caught hold and clung like a bat. There was no place where I could firmly brace my feet or climb it, for the roots of it were far from me, and the branches hung far, and big and long branches that overshadowed Charybdis. So here we go. There's a tree that reaches, so let's imagine here's the rocks. There's a tree that comes way out, and its branches kind of come out here. All right, once again, excellent Mr. Troop drawing, I know. You guys could do way better than this. What does Odysseus do? Well, here he is. He's holding on to a little branch. This is Odysseus. That's his head. Oh, this is a terrible drawing. This might be one of the worst. All right, there he is. He's hanging on. He's hanging on to the branch, and you can see him. As Charybdis sucks down, okay, he holds on, okay. Inexorably, I hung on, waiting for it to vomit the kiln mass back up again, right? So they suck down the kiln mass, waiting for it to vomit it back up again. Remember, Charybdis, I said this is important to remember that she vomits it back out. I longed for them, and they came late. This made me laugh. At the time when a man leaves the law court for dinner, and after judging many disputes brought to him by litigious young men. So it's like a dad coming home late, right? Dad is home late. You want him to come home, okay? But he's been busy, and that's kind of like what happened. It came late. He was holding on, okay? And it took the timbers. It was a time that the timbers. That was the time that it took the timbers to appear from Charybdis. So the timbers come back up. Then I let go with my hands and feet and dropped off. Came crashing down between and missing the two long timbers. But I mounted these, and with both hands I paddled me out. So he is now over 2 pieces of wood. So you got 2 pieces of wood. He's over them. Okay. Here's Odysseus once again. He's got his feet over them. Okay. These are longer probably than that. And here he is. Here's his hands. Here's his head. Okay. All right. That's once again a beautiful Mr. Troop drawing. There's his other foot going down. He's now paddling out. All right. And paddling out. But the Father of gods and men did not let Scylla see me again, or I would not escape from sheer destruction. From there I was carried 9 days, and on the 10th night, the gods brought me to the island of Augia, the home of Calypso. Sorry about that. With lovely hair and a dreaded goddess who talks to immortals. And she befriended me, took care of me. But why tell me the rest of this? Why tell you the rest of the story again? Since yesterday in your house I told to you and your majestic wife, it is hateful to me to tell the story over again when it has been well told. So I guess he told them the story of Calypso before. We got it starting in book 5. Okay, so Odysseus's story is done. Now the Phaeacians are going to have a chance to take him home, and we'll pick that up in book 13. All right, well, congratulations for getting halfway through the Odyssey, and we'll have a few activities, and then we'll pick this up in, I believe, next week. Take care. Bye.